Recorded statement of Mark Bennett, lawn maintenance specialist with 12 years of professional experience. Statement recorded at his own initiative several months after the events described. The mower sank about 15 centimeters, and in the same second, I received a message. I had not yet shut off the engine, and the screen already read, "Do not stand there." What struck me most at that moment was this. If someone warns me before I myself realize the danger, then that person knows what is under the ground, and possibly knows what could come out of it. That was when I first thought this job was not about grass at all. I shut off the engine and stepped back. The ground did not crumble. It simply bent inward, like a lid. Dull even. Under the turf, it felt as if there was metal. I looked toward the house. A 3-story stone mansion stood silent. Windows dark, some of them boarded up. No vehicles, no signs of life. And a strange quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to avoid the property. Honestly, my first thought was to leave, but I had already taken the money. The job came through a website without a name. $3,000 for a week of work. Far too much for a property like that. The next day, there was an envelope in the mailbox. $2,000 in cash. No note. No contact information. Later, one condition was added. Work alone, and do not disturb the house. The drive to the property took about 40 minutes. The last stretch, the navigator kept losing the route. Signal disappeared about 5 kilometers out. The forest grew denser, the road narrower, and the gate. The gate was standing open, as if I was expected. The first day passed almost normally, but the feeling of being watched did not go away. Not fear, more like irritation, as if someone was constantly observing me. Toward evening, a message came through. Good start. Continue. I had not told anyone that I had begun work. I saw no cameras, only one new floodlight on an old utility pole. I did not think much of it at the time. On the second day, another message arrived. Pay special attention to the rear section of the property. The grass there was taller, the soil softer, and that was where I saw the tracks. Large. Not canine and not human. 4 toes and 1 offset, with claws. The tracks led from the forest to the house and back. I photographed them, and then I deleted the images. I caught myself thinking that if the photos remained, I might be asked to return, and by then, I did not want to. The phone vibrated immediately. Do not get distracted. The work is more important. That was when the unpleasant thought appeared. This was not a client in the house. This was surveillance, cameras, sensors. Maybe someone in the forest with optics. I did not know how, but I felt it. I was being handled. I did not go to the police. There were too few facts, and I was not going back there to collect evidence. On the third day, I was working in the far section of the property. The mower struggled through weeds, and there, the ground sagged under the wheels. I crouched and knocked on the turf. A hollow, empty sound. The phone vibrated. Do not dig deep. That was the moment when it became truly disturbing. I was already about to dig when I heard a short sound from the forest, a metallic knock, 1 strike, and then silence. Then there was another sensation, very strange, as if someone was standing behind me. Not the sound of steps, not movement, just the certainty that I was no longer alone. I hesitated for about 10 seconds. I seriously considered leaving. Then, a new message arrived. Do not turn around. Just do your work. And it was exactly after that I picked up the shovel, because at that moment it became clear I was no longer just a mower, operator. I was carrying out someone else's task, and possibly I understood that too late. I could have closed the hatch immediately, covered it with soil, and finished the job. Now, that seems like the most logical option, but at the time, not only professional curiosity was at work, there was also a feeling that if I left, the answers would catch up with me anyway. To be honest, I wanted to leave. Very much. After years of working on properties, underground voids are usually explainable. An old cellar, utilities, drainage. I repeated this to myself several times, like a spell. Look at a couple of steps and that is all. Just make sure. The metal of the hatch was cold, even though the day was warm. When the cover shifted, the sound came out too loud. The scrape seemed to fall downward instead of spreading through the air. That immediately caused tension, and almost at once, the phone vibrated. There was almost no signal above ground, but a message came through. Be careful. The steps are slippery. That was the first time I truly froze, because it meant one thing. Either I was being watched, or someone knew more than they should. I looked again at the light poles along the wall. I did not notice a camera, but honestly, a dome on a pole could easily have been a camera, and I might simply not have seen it. After that thought, the descent felt heavier. A brick staircase led downward. The steps were wet. The smell of dampness grew stronger with each step, and the cold. Not basement coolness, but cold, like inside a refrigerator. Halfway down the stairs, I stopped. I seriously considered turning back. My heart was beating faster than normal. My palms were damp. Rationally, it was simple. Private property, unknown basement, strange messages. There was no reason to go farther, but standing there felt worse. The most dangerous feeling in moments like that is the idea that once you have started, you should finish. It pushes harder than fear. At the bottom there was a small landing and 2 tunnels. The left one looked wider. I went that way, even though everything inside resisted. After a few steps, it became clear that it only looked that way. The ceiling dropped. I had to bend down. The walls almost brushed my shoulders, water underfoot. The brick crumbled in places. That was when I heard the first knock. Metal against stone, a single strike. I stopped immediately. Silence. I took 2 more steps. The knock repeated, slightly louder, or closer. I could not tell. I stood there for about 10 seconds, then 15. I was genuinely preparing to turn back, but the sound came again. Now, 2 short strikes in a row. That was when the unpleasant realization appeared. This was not a random noise, not a falling tool, too rhythmic, too much like movement. The phone vibrated again. A little more. Not an order, not a request, just a statement. That made it worse. I shone the flashlight upward and noticed a thin cable running along the ceiling. Old, almost blending into the brick. That explained the signal. Cameras could also be explained. The thought that somewhere nearby there was a lens watching me appeared on its own. Without proof, but very persistent. The sound again, now closer and stranger. No longer just a strike. First a brief scrape, then a knock. As if something heavy occasionally brushed the wall. I caught myself wanting to walk more quietly, even though there was no point. If I was being watched, the sound of my steps did not matter. The tunnel gradually widened. Breathing became easier, but the cold intensified. and the sound was now very close, irregular, but clearly nearer than before. Then a door appeared ahead, large, dark, reinforced with iron bands, open only a couple of centimeters, and immediately visible were deep scratches on the inner side, not old. Brick dust still lay beneath them. I stopped. The knocking ceased completely, and that sudden silence frightened me more than the sound itself, as if the source had just realized that I was there. The phone vibrated once more. Proceed carefully. That was when I first thought clearly. I had not simply been allowed here. I had been brought here. Not to clear the property, not to find the hatch, to clear a path. I stood in front of the door for almost a minute. I seriously considered turning around and leaving. And now, honestly, I regret that I did not. But I pushed the door with my foot. It began to open, and from inside came air warmer than the tunnel. When the door opened, the first thing I felt was warmth, not strong, but noticeable. After the cold tunnel, it was strange, as if the room had been aired recently, or as if someone had been there. The beam of the flashlight first hit the floor. I did not immediately understand what I was seeing. Bones. There were far too many of them. Not an orderly burial, not storage, just chaos, mixed together, scattered, partially crushed. I immediately felt the urge to close the door again. Purely instinctive, but standing with my back to the tunnel felt even worse. I tried to convince myself they were animals. That happens. Old farms, illegal kennels, all kinds of things. But there was no certainty. And it was not even about the shape of the bones. It was the quantity. The sense that this place had been used for a long time. I took a step inside, and almost at once, I caught myself on a strange thought. If I had been watched the whole time above ground, why would it be any different here? I automatically swept the flashlight across the ceiling. I saw nothing obvious, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I moved farther in, carefully, trying not to step on the bones. They sometimes crunched softly under my boots. For some reason, that sound disturbed me more than anything else. Against the far wall stood a metal table. Old, rusted, remains of papers, glass vials. It looked like a laboratory, but long abandoned. Nearby lay a collar. The copper tag was still intact. I picked it up automatically. Sample 7? No name, only a number. That was when the thought truly struck me for the first time. If there was a 7th, then there had been others. But there were clearly more than 7 sets of bones around. Far more. I directed the flashlight at the floor more carefully. And I noticed gaps. Several areas looked strangely clear. Not neat, just places where there were almost no bones, even though many lay nearby. As if part of the skeletons had been removed from here. Or had left on their own. That thought made me physically uncomfortable. I turned sharply toward the tunnel. For half a second, I was sure someone was standing in the passage. Of course, there was no one. But my heart rate jumped, and that was exactly when I felt that same gaze from above again, almost with certainty now. I raised the flashlight higher, and this time, I saw it. A small black dome under the ceiling. A camera or a sensor. Old, but clearly operational. That both calmed and unsettled me. At least the mysticism disappeared. What remained was surveillance. And that is sometimes worse. The phone vibrated immediately. The signal here was even better than in the tunnel. Full strength. That meant equipment was nearby. The message was short. You have seen enough. Not a question, not a suggestion. And almost immediately after that, I heard a sound behind me. Not the metallic knock from before. The boom. A soft friction of bones, very light, as if someone had carefully shifted one of the piles. Without haste, without noise, I did not turn around. To this day, I think that was the right decision. I simply moved towards the exit. At first walking, then faster. Because the feeling appeared that if I turned around, I would have to react. And I did not want to know to what. When I was almost back at the tunnel, the phone vibrated again. Hurry. And I did. Very much so. I reached the surface faster than I went down. I did not run, but I almost did. I just wanted to be in the light. At least there everything looked normal. When I climbed out, the air felt too light. For the first time the whole time, I took a proper breath. I closed the hatch immediately. The metal shut with a dull sound. No echo. As if the ground swallowed it. Then I began covering the opening quickly, almost roughly. I was not leveling the ground. I was hiding it. At some point, I caught myself on a strange thought. I was not just closing the hatch. I was trying to make sure that no one would ever find it again. Not even me. The phone was silent, and that was more unsettling than the messages. While they were writing, I at least knew that someone was controlling the situation. When the connection disappeared, there was a feeling that the control had ended. About 40 minutes later, the phone vibrated again. Enough, leave it as it is. Almost immediately, a transfer came through. The remaining payment, plus a noticeable bonus. Far too much for an ordinary loan. It looked like payment. Not for work, but for silence. I left the same day. I did not even pack my tools. I just wanted distance. But the feeling that it was over did not appear. After a couple of days, strange small things started happening at home. First a phone call at night. A single ring. And then it dropped. The number was hidden. Then again. And again. A week later, I noticed a car in the yard, a dark station wagon. At first, I did not pay attention, but it was there. 3 evenings in a row. Sometimes the headlights turned on, but no one got out. Rationally, I understood that coincidences happen, but sleeping became harder. I started checking the windows before bed, closing the curtains earlier, getting irritated over small things. Sometimes, I caught myself being angry, not at the client, but at myself for going down there. 3 days after returning, I saw a news report. An attack on a tourist in the forest near Hillside. Serious injuries. The description of the animal was vague. At that time, I did not connect it to the basement, but then the reports came in a series. The next attack was closer to the road leading to the mansion. That was where a strange detail was mentioned for the first time. The creature sometimes stood on its hind legs. The pattern was too precise to dismiss as coincidence. That thought was genuinely alarming. The phone began vibrating again from time to time. New numbers, the same short phrases. There is another object. A different location. Higher payment. I did not respond. But one day, the message was different. You did well. That is why you are being recommended. That sounded worse than a threat. After that, I completely stopped feeling safe at home. The car in the yard disappeared, but the sense of being watched remained. I understood that it sounded paranoid, but I could not ignore it. About a month after that job, I heard a sound at night. A quiet scratching along the outer wall of the house, very similar to the sound in the tunnel. I did not go to the window right away. I stood in the kitchen for about 5 minutes, listening. My heart was beating louder than the sound. Two thoughts were spinning in my head. It is an animal. It has found me. The sound repeated twice. And then the phone vibrated. A new number. The message was short. Do not open. After the message telling me not to open, I stood in the kitchen for about 10 more minutes. I held the phone in my hand. My heart was beating louder than the sound outside. If the client wanted me, then either he could see my house, or he knew what was happening nearby. Both options were bad, but at least there was logic in them. I did not open the door. The scratching continued for a couple more minutes, and then stopped. No footsteps, no sound of leaving. Just silence, as if someone had switched the sound off. In the morning, I went outside to check the wall. There were 3 deep grooves in the siding, almost a centimeter deep. The spacing between them was exactly the same as on the brick walls in the tunnel. That was when the picture finally came together. The client had not been monitoring the property because the lawn mattered to him. He was controlling the territory, the hatch, the tunnel, possibly what was inside it, and I, without realizing it, had helped him clear access. One more thing also became obvious. This was not one person with the phone. It was a system. Power supply, cables, underground communication, cameras. The surveillance never disappeared, because it did not need to. That was why the money was what it was. That was why silence mattered more than the work. And that was why the message telling me not to open was not concern. It was risk management. If I had opened the door and something had entered the house, the story would have become public. That was not acceptable to them. After that, I did think about the police for a long time. But what would I say? Private property, an old basement, bones without examination, scratches on a house that could be blamed on an animal. It was not enough for an investigation. But it would have been enough for the client to reach me again. Directly this time, I sold the house quickly. It was about the fact that I stopped trusting walls. I moved into an apartment in the city center. A high floor, no yard, no forest nearby. I chose it so that there would not be a single door that could be scratched from the outside. I became a different person in simple things. I stopped leaving my phone in another room. I began waking up at any click in the stairwell. I check the locks not because I fear burglars. I check them because I know that some threats do not break the door right away. They wait until you open it yourself. The attacks in the news continued for some time. Then they almost disappeared. That does not reassure me, because sometimes I check satellite images of that mansion. The lawn there is still perfectly trimmed. That means someone continues to work. That means new people sometimes receive the same attractive offers. Sometimes messages come again, new numbers, the same short phrases. There is another object, a reliable client, good payment. I block them immediately. But one thing still does not let go of me. The sound at my house came exactly 1 month after I covered the hatch, not earlier, not later. As if someone allowed time, and then checked the result. I'm not claiming that I understand what exactly was there, but I know one thing for certain. The message telling me not to open arrived about 5 seconds before the scratching began. At the time I thought, fine, they are watching me. And then I realized something else. They are not watching me. They are simply, always, already watching.